Hi everyone, this is Vivek Shrivastava and welcome to my channel Journey of an Entrepreneur. In today's special guest episode, we have with us Akhil Mishra, who is an advocate, a lawyer, and also co-founder of MT Legal Team, which is a legal firm that assists entrepreneurs and businesses with their various legal concerns and problems. So welcome, Akhil. Thanks for taking the time to join us. I'm sure we'll get a lot of valuable advice from you. I'm particularly excited because just personally, all the legal issues I faced and I had to think about and take care of. I mean, it's a big part of the entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah,
So
thank you so much.
welcome.
Thank you so much, Vivek. Thank you so much for the warm introduction. Thank you so much for the warm welcome. I'm happy to be here because I like working in the startup space. I like talking about startup world in general. So this is going to be a great journey and like podcast essentially for like especially for you and me. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it very much. So tell us about your start. How did you get into the legal side of things? Did you always want to pursue legal stuff and not be a doctor or engineer or any of that stuff?
That makes sense. So essentially, actually, it was, to be quite frank with you, it was actually suggested by my father. Like he told me, like you should like pursue this one, right? Because I never wanted to be a doctor, right? I never had like any like passion when it comes to coding and such, right? So the legal world seemed like a fair world essentially at that time, right? And that's how I grew, like in this like I did my exams. I applied for the university and such, and that's how I got to know more about how to run a business, at least on the legal side of things, right? What to consider, what not to consider, what to focus on, what not to focus on, and everything else. And that's how we started. That's how like we basically proceeded by learning everything on there.
So after finishing legal studies, did you work for a legal company or what happened after that?
That's actually quite an interesting question because I'm the co-founder of NT Legal Team, right? So we started the firm back in the university days, actually,
Oh,
right?
wow.
So yeah, so when we were studying in the university, personally, I applied for a lot of internships, right? And I saw that I was not actually learning a lot, if that makes sense, right? By that I mean I had to still do my own research work. I had to still do the everything else, right? That's not to say I did not have a great mentor. Towards the end, I had a great mentor, but by then I had already started my agency, you could say, essentially by then, right? So I was in direct contact with the clients then, right? And I personally realized that there's much more to learn by directly working with people in this field, right? Rather than getting something delegated to you, right? And I did that with my co-founder. His name is Abhishek Kumar Thakur, and he's been with me since the start. And then the other one, his name is Abhishek Kushwaha. So we three have just been at it now. Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. So did you spot a gap in the system that you could fill during your internship that, you, because it would seem that possibly, there's all these companies handling things. So it was probably challenging to start your own firm or agency. So did you spot something missing in the market that you could fulfill?
I think the only thing that we saw was the interpersonal communication or connection that we lacked essentially through working with a company or working through a firm, like another firm, essentially, right? And during the internship days, I also saw that there's a lot more focus given to volume when it comes to legality, right? How many consultations can you give in a month, right? Rather than focusing on the quality, right? How few but how good of a consultation can you give in that
Right.
specific period, right? So that was one of the things that we saw, and that's how we started the firm. Essentially, now it's a firm, but initially it was like an agency, you can say.
Right. So when you say interpersonal was lacking, do you mean between the advocate and their clients or between advocates within the firm?
I could say like it's a mix of both,
Okay,
essentially.
both.
Right. It's a mix of both, essentially, because I feel like there was a lot of focus, again, like I mentioned, a lot of focus was given to the volume rather than the quality when it comes to it. So
Okay.
clients in itself, I think I would realize this later, at least in the service sector as a whole, right? Clients in itself, they are treated as checklist rather than humans, if that makes sense, right?
Oh
So
yeah, I
yeah,
yes.
yeah. So like, yeah,
Sorry.
you're just like a name to them. You're not like a real human, if that.
Not even name and case number, probably.
A case number, right? Task list number one, essentially.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I've worked in my 30-year career. I've worked at all different kind of companies, startups, big, 50,000 employee giant companies, and the larger the company, the less personal it is. Generally, I mean, it varies, and it varies within your team, and whatever
Ex-
the culture of the company might be. But generally, yeah, that's the case. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
So when did you know that? Did you feel you had the entrepreneur bug in you? You know, and did you? If so, when did you realize that that was the path for you?
That makes
Or
sense. Freedom, I think, was one of the main thing that I kind of wanted. Freedom and flexibility, right? For the legal firm, I have noticed or heard and seen actually that there's a lot more investment when it comes to the number of working hours you have to put in, right? So you have to leave your home at 7 in the morning, and then you are generally coming back home at 10 at night, 11 at night, sometimes even stay in the firm, right? So that gives me zero to no flexibility. That gives me zero to no freedom, right? And entrepreneurship is something that I realize gives me control of that freedom and flexibility. Obviously, there's a caveat to it where you have to be accountable, you have to be self accountable when it comes to things. You cannot just work whenever, obviously, you can work whenever you want to, but you still have to dedicate a set number of hours. But at least I was dedicating it to my firm, essentially, right? And helping people that I'm working with, essentially. So that was the main thing.
right, right, right. Tell me about getting like your first customer. Was that challenging, or did that come easy? Usually, I mean, and the reason I ask is most startups, their first few customers or the getting traction going is usually very, very tough.
Yeah, that's a great question actually, because how we got our first customer was through a freelancing platform, right? So for the freelancing platforms, there's a lot of them, Fiverr, Upwork, everywhere, right? So we actually set up our profile everywhere we can, right? And that's how we had a lot of like wide range that we can focus on, and they already had a lot of volume or traffic coming to these platforms, right? So we just only needed to track once. And it's true when they say that you just need one client at the end of the day, and then it's a snowball effect, right? So after a month or a month and a half, we when we set up our profiles on the freelancing platform, that's when we got our first gig, you can say, right? And it was a consultation gig which was only for $5. So we just went with the cheapest, right? Because at that point of time we were looking for experience more than anything else, right? We were looking for experience, we were looking to build up our testimonials. That's the main thing that we were looking for. And that's how it all started, with the simple consultation.
Nice.
Yeah.
And this was through one of those freelancing platforms, you said.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Right, right. Um, could you tell a little bit about any challenges you faced in, not so much starting your startup, but sort of maybe say marketing or staff that you hired and things like that. Do any stories come to mind that would interest us?
Yes, actually. See, the thing is, startup journey, it sounds simple on paper, right? It's like you're starting your own business, you're doing your own thing, everything's working well, right? But the main thing we realize actually working in this field is because you expect something to happen doesn't mean it will happen, right? So just because you have a firm doesn't mean you'll automatically get customers, right? Just because you have a product doesn't mean it will automatically sell, right? So we had to do that. So we had to actually, back in the day, like back when we started on Fiverr, at least there was a thing that you can apply for briefs or gigs that other people have posted, right? And every day you had a set number of limits you can send, like 10 requests, 20 requests, something like that, right? So we were basically grinding that. So every day we would just use everything that we saw, right? Just to get on top of everything. So that's how generally we started. And slowly and surely we started understanding like there's actually a big chunk of market that does not focus on communication, and that's something we capitalized a lot more on, essentially talking to people, just understanding what's going on. Actually this year we are now focused on making a lot of content to get ourselves out there, essentially.
Right.
Yeah.
And content as in posting on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, that sort of thing.
Yeah, posting on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and then the main platforms that like our personally focused on is Twitter, which is now X, and then LinkedIn, essentially. And
Right.
these posts are
LinkedIn,
like
yeah. Yeah.
personal experiences that we have seen other founders and other startups, other businesses face, and the effects that it could have, like adverse effect. I think from your experience, you must have seen like there's a lot of delays, there's a lot of things that goes wrong, and
Oh,
nothing
yeah.
is ever in your control.
Yes, absolutely. And, the more experienced you are with having done startups or being involved in startups, the more you know and you can avoid some of the pitfalls. In my case, I'm realizing just how little I knew, even though, I had 30 years experience and whatnot, but that was not in the startup world. I'm just realizing, how little I knew, and therefore, because of that, how many challenges I faced and mistakes I made. But
Yeah.
that's the whole point of this channel, is to assist our viewers with all of this, so that after watching these videos, they'll make less mistakes and have a smoother journey. Talking about your how you were getting customers. So you started off with the freelancing platforms and working those, and then now you're doing content. Did you do other types of kind of old school type marketing, like newspaper ads or various other things like that?
Not exactly.
Hmm.
Not exactly. And there's a good reason for that too,
Uh-huh.
because I think we initially wanted a lot of organic traffic. So we did not want to waste a lot of money when it comes to it. We wanted to see what all opportunities can we get, right, through organic things, which is applying to those briefs, applying to those gigs, posting something on the internet, seeing who's reacting to it, seeing what kind of things are coming along our way, right? And now what we are focusing now on is making sure that we have a platform, which is our website, and then making sure that after the website is out, then we will start paid advertisement, because now we understand what the market wants, essentially, right? So the advertisement that we will run will be really specific, right? So we it will talk about the specific points that we know businesses face, right, or startups face. So that will help us basically generate a more targeted audience.
So how about financials in the sense, probably to begin with, see, what's different in your case and for the case of any other type of people who are offering expert services, whether it's legal or even medical or fitness or whatever the case may be, you don't need a big factory and, all that those kind of expenses are not there. But what kind of expenses were there? Did you have challenges financially? Look, because most startups, they run out of money. So, did you have a situation like that, or was it never really an issue? Because you're just exchanging your time for money, so it's not really a question of large capital outlay.
Yeah. Personally, like in our experience, no. I think a lot of service, like a lot of people in the service sector do not have this issue, right? Because overall, you are just, like you mentioned, you are only exchanging your time for money, essentially, right? But if I look into the future, right? If I know the trajectory that we are going in, we will now have to have the financial, basically not constraints, but we'll have to manage our financial, right? Because we'll first of all have to run a website, right? So that's hosting and everything else has to be required. We'll have to run the advertisements. Again, that's host, like have to hire an agency for that, right? And then right now what we do is we create our own content, right? So a lot of time is spent on that essentially, right? And so now we will be moving on training someone who can write legal content in a better way, essentially, or at least at par. And then the financial will have to go to that too, essentially. So that's something that we see happening, and that's a new challenge essentially that we'll have to face. But we are like kind of ready for it, yeah.
So tell me about, mentioned content that you're creating. Could you speak a little bit about the content? What kind of content do you create? Is it like legal advice, or is it uh, just commentary on current legal stuff going on in the world, or what?
It's a mix actually. So from my experience, I've seen different platforms have different content working for them essentially, right? For example, on X, short contents go a lot well. On LinkedIn, carousels and long form posts go a lot well, right? So for X, I post like couple of lines which talks about one specific problem that a person can face, right? So for example, I will mention wherever you are drafting your privacy policy for your website, right? If you are collecting the data from someone, make sure to ask for like explicit consent for that, right? There should be a button, or there should be highlighted points that cool, we are taking these information from you, we are storing it for this much time, right? Things of that nature, right? On X, that's the thing. And then on LinkedIn, it's much more detailed, right? So we will cover if you were, for example, hiring a freelancer from another country. You are based in India, you are hiring someone from US, then that's someone you don't know, personally speaking. That's someone you haven't met IRL, right? So what all to consider when you are drafting a contract for them, right? So that's one thing that we can make. And then every Tuesday, without fail, actually, we post case studies. Case studies are essentially like projects that we have done, and the problems, it is divided into a good format, which is an introduction which tells what the client was looking for. It goes over the problems the client had faced in the past or we see in the project, and then it covers the solutions that we gave that client, and then the result, essentially. So anyone in that situation can learn something out of it, and without having to pay anyone, for free.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah.
How long do those videos last for? 10 minutes, 15 minutes, or the one in
It's
which
a
you? Yeah.
case study. It's a carousel essentially.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, can you speak to us about any sort of staff issues you faced, or did you have trouble? I don't know if you even got to the point where you hired, juniors or interns or whatever the case may be, and issues with staff, because a lot of startup founders run into that issue, and I know I've run into that issue a lot. So just was wondering what your experience on that.
Actually, we did try to have other people onboarded. So, like I mentioned, we are a firm of three people. So, like it's me, then there's the
Right,
Abhishek, right? So,
right.
two Abhisheks. And right now, we have an intern, and she works on content creation, but on the business account, if that makes sense, right? So, on our LinkedIn and Instagram, for example, and
Right.
Facebook, she creates content. Previously, we tried hiring or having people on a commission or referral basis, where we will give people a contract once our hand was full, and then we will share revenue on that, right? But the main issue that we ran into was communication and quality of work and the lack of progress updates. Those are the
Right.
three main things that we run into. So suppose we give someone a contract and we are like, cool, these are the requirements of the clients, we need it by this time. They would take like an entire day to even reply to that request, right?
Because we're
So,
doing other contracts.
exactly, right? So
Yes.
it was we did not have anyone on the full-time basis, but we had no communication that we can rely on so and so person
Right.
to handle something for us, right? And we had that happen not just once, a lot of times, essentially, right? So hiring someone or having someone on our team right now is not feasible because we haven't found the right candidate. So it only just not wasted, I won't use the word waste there, but it opened our eyes to the challenges of having someone good on your team too, right? And finding that person.
No wonder. I was wondering a little bit about the market you serve. I know you had mentioned that your particular expertise is contracts. Are your partners, the two Abhisheks, they also do that, or do they do other areas of legal specialization?
We all, so basically we handle contracts mostly. We handle advisory, so guidance essentially. And then we also handle fundraising, right? So fundraising in India we handle. As long as the person has an investor, we can handle fundraising for them, essentially.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
wonderful,
Yeah.
wonderful. So we will talk about that.
Yeah.
So, the way I'm doing this, and I wanted to talk a little bit about your own startup journey with your startup, your MT Legal Team startup, and also the advice you can give people who are thinking about doing their startup, who are in the middle of their startup. And I've got a whole list of issues to uh, talk to you about
Yeah.
the stuff I face, the stuff, all the legal issues I ran into. I was going through your journey first. So I guess I'll try and wind up speaking about your journey by just asking what your plans for growing your business are. I know you serve other countries besides India. In
Yeah.
fact, I think you do more in other countries than in India. And
Yeah.
and I'm asking this from the point of view of a startup. Like, because startup people are always interested in expansion, right? How do I make my business bigger? How do I get more clients? So obviously, I know you mentioned marketing-wise, though you're doing the content and so on. What was your plans for the future for your
Yeah.
business?
Essentially, our plan is to like go into the international market a little bit more because we see Middle East and like specifically Dubai as the main hub when it comes to businesses and startups, right? So that's something which will be our main target area, or like plan to expand into. And for that, what we are doing is networking and collaborations. When it comes to any startup out there or anyone who's starting their journey for the first time, the best thing I can recommend to them is focus a lot more on the connections that you have, right? Build connections with people around you, first of all, right? Anyone who's in your field. And then, second thing you should target is who is your target market to begin with, right? So, understand those two, first of all, and have basic idea of what they are doing and then connect, because that's what we are doing. We are connecting with people to expand. We are making like every single day or like every other day I'm having partnership calls, collaboration calls, etc., right? The more you do, the more your probability of winning increases. So that's our future plan, essentially, to have the paid advertisement going, to have the content still going, but also a lot more focus on networking and collaborations.
Right, right. Networking is always good. So tell me, what the differences you see in marketing between different countries? So marketing to America versus marketing to Dubai versus marketing to Indian clients. Do you see differences there? And if so, what are the differences?
That's a really good question again. It depends on what specific like aspect of it are we marketing essentially. So for example, if I was marketing in the UK, right, I would focus 100% on GDPR because that's prevalent there, right? And
UK,
GDPR,
but UK did the Brexit, right? So the
they
GDPR,
have the same
oh,
thing
they still
essentially.
have the, okay.
Yeah. So it's yeah, it's
Okay.
the same thing essentially, right? So I will focus 100% on GDPR there, and then, for example, if I was focusing on the Indian startups, essentially, right, I would focus a lot more on the business registration aspect of it because in India we've seen business registration is a lot more common, or it's a lot more happening essentially in India. So that's the main thing that we would focus on. So it's a focus. On the USA, we have not specifically seen anything stand out. It's actually a lot of mixed, it's a lot more mixed essentially, right? A lot of them need advisory, a lot of them need guidance, a lot of them need contracts, right?
You
So
know,
everything they need.
regarding the US, one thing I've heard of, and this is again, I don't know for sure, it's just what I've heard from various people is a lot of fraudulent litigation happens there. And, where the other side is just trying to make money. They know perfectly well they don't have a case, but they'll do it just to, cause a problem for you. And then you'll settle out of court just to get them to go away. And then that settlement was what they were after right from the beginning. So is that true, or what do you think about that?
Like personally, I don't deal in litigation, but what you have mentioned is something I think I've heard a lot too, at least from my friends from the
Right.
US or clients,
True.
right? Where they mention that people are quick to jump on the litigation bandwagon. Where
Yes.
if there's even a small issue, right? For example, in India, people will jump to talking it out, right? There's an issue, people will talk it out essentially, right? In the US, I've seen people are quick to sue them essentially for damages, right? If you're delayed, if there's a delay in the project, they'll just quickly jump on, like they will send you a notice, you will get that warning, they will just handle everything in court. So most of the time it is for genuine reasons, but obviously there are people who are doing it for just suing person and getting something. Actually, I've heard this recently. There's a guy in World Guinness Record, the book, and how he got to that book was he has the most cases filed in the entire world. So he filed the most cases to get the most damages. So he has earned $1 million in damages just by filing case, essentially, and
Yeah,
getting it
yeah.
out. Yeah.
No, I mean, they have a slang for people like that. They're called ambulance chasers
Yeah.
in the US.
Yeah.
So, yeah, which brings me to another interesting question I'm sure a lot of the viewers would be interested in knowing. And it pertains to me as well as anyone else who has a startup that is global. I have an app that will be released all over the world. So the term is the long arm of the law. So to simplify it, like let's say I've incorporated in India, but someone in the USA has an issue after using my app, whatever, they have a problem, so they can file a case against me in the US. And even though I'm in India, my company's in India, I'll have to fight that case in the US and hire US attorneys. Is that, can you speak to the scenario like that? Can you give us a little information about a scenario like that?
Not exactly is how it would run. It would depend a lot more on what resolution center have you chosen to begin with, right? So there's a lot of cross-border contracts that happen, for example, right? So your application that you will be running, it's sort of a contract too, right? Because anyone who's using your application is agreeing to certain terms and conditions that you have set, right? So it's a contract, right? It's not like directly they're signing anything, but it's indirectly a contract. They're consenting to something, right? So what happens in those cases is you have a specific resolution center where if there is an issue, it will be settled in XYZ place, right? So, for example, they mention the governing law, or if a dispute has happened, this area is where the dispute will be settled, essentially, right? For example, in India, that's why people, when they are reviewing a contract, or when they are changing it or amending it, they try to make sure the resolution center, or like wherever the dispute will be resolved, will be their own place, essentially. So they won't have to travel. Yeah.
Got it, got it, got it. Okay. And then the other party will have to agree to that because they agreed to the terms and conditions, right?
Exactly, exactly. But there's
Got it.
actually, so this is on the generic level, this is on the
Right.
basic level, right?
Right.
Now you get into the specifics. Now you can not sue the is not always a good idea, essentially, right? Why is it not a good idea? Because it takes time, it takes money, right? And so what most people do is they have set number of steps that you have to take before you get to that. The first step is to you resolve the issue between yourself. So for example, if they have an issue with your application, they will first reach out to the customer support. Right, that's the first step. And you have to mention that, by the way, in your application. That the first step that is to be done is to carefully get to a middle ground through customer support or negotiation. And then you can go for the other aspects, like they can like sue you, arbitration, mediation, anything like that, essentially.
Got it. Great.
Yeah.
Well, let me now just turn to going through various concerns or not even concerns, steps, essential steps that entrepreneurs should take in the journey that he goes through from right from the beginning, from his idea conception to the point where he releases whatever it is to the public, and then he's years and years into the business. So the first thing, and I've already said this many times in my lessons learned videos in this channel, where I, give my advice on various topics, and what I always say is involve the legal team right from the beginning. So when you come up with a concept, run that by the legal team and let them look at it for potential, legal issues. So for example, if someone's come up with an idea for the social networking app, uh, show that and go, hey, would some of the established big giants in this sue me for, sort of essentially copying what they're doing, or am I different enough that they won't do that? And that's just one example, but you know what I mean. So would you agree with that? Should an entrepreneur work with the legal team, right? And show them what their idea, their proof of concept, their prototype, as they get to each stage, from the concept to the prototype to a more advanced prototype to the final thing, they keep the legal team in the loop the whole time and have them raise any red flags?
Yes and no to that, actually.
Really?
Yeah. And the reason why I say this is because every business will be different, essentially, right? Every market will be different. If we are talking about first time entrepreneurs, they don't even have funds to do anything to begin with, right? So their main focus is to get something out there, right? That's why they hire any, like, for example, website developers and such, right? Or any like product managers, right? So what we have seen personally is legal is at the bottom of the list, and rightfully so, if that makes sense, because they have to develop something good. But what I suggest in such cases is do your own due diligence at least. Do
Sure.
your own research at least, right? Don't just blindly go into something, right? Because you see someone else doing it. Because they have done their research and they are doing something really different than it looks on the face value, right? And that's the most common in contention that we also get. So and so business is doing it, why can't we do it? Right? There's a reason why you can't do it, because they have got the licenses that they need, they have got the permissions that they needed, right? They have the right documents, like teams, everything else in place. That's what they're doing. That's example number one, where I do not suggest that you definitely need a legal team, but you should at least do your own research, because your funds can be used in some place better. That's only for the first time entrepreneurs, right? The second case is someone like, for example, you have been doing it for the business side quite a while, right? And if you were to now start a new business, you have the funds and the expertise to run a business, right? So you know what you can expect out of it, you know what you should get out of it. In your case, I would suggest 100% definitely have a legal team from the start, right? For the contracts, the people that you will be signing, for the markets that you are targeting, everything else, have a legal team, have everything clear on the day, from day one, have a strong foundation. Now the third scenario is, it's the first time founders, but they are targeting a market that is so susceptible to legal issues that before they even take the step forward and invest any money into anything, they should consult a lawyer, right? Now, which fields are these? These can be, for example, healthcare. These can be financials field. It can be gambling, right? Fantasy markets and online casinos, right? You do not develop an online casino platform from day one. You first understand, if I was to develop and market it, what would happen? What do I need to do? Is there any licenses I need to take? Once you consult with the lawyer on day one, you will get a whole action plan that you have to consider essentially. So for the first time entrepreneurs in the third case, I definitely recommend, depending on the field that you're targeting, depending on which marketing are you taking, if it's a highly risky market, go for a lawyer from day one.
Got it. So I think the takeaways I'm getting from this is, like you said, it's a risky market, or even a market where like a lot is at stake, such as a
Yeah.
person's life, like in the
Yeah.
medical, or
Exactly.
large sums of money, like a bank or a stock market
Yeah.
scenario. Yeah.
Yeah.
Got it. Got it. Another thing I ran into was trademark and copyrights. So trademarks, it was, again, my lack of, legal experience and all of this. I didn't realize that, you know, even something that sounds phonetically similar can be a cause for a trademark dispute
Yeah.
and all of that. So that was quite challenging, and I went through a lot with that. And
Yeah.
I didn't get very good legal advice at the time to compound the problem. So, but yeah, please speak to us about trademarks.
Like what specifically? Like when should you get it, or like if you
Yes.
should get it
Yeah.
at all?
Yeah. Should we get it? When should we get it? What are the things to worry about in those? Or what should we be concerned about as far as trademark goes?
Yeah.
Can we, just anything that comes to mind for a startup
Yeah.
person?
I like to I like to personally think any step that a startup has to take from a business standpoint and then add a legal standpoint to it, right? So what I mean by that, if your whole brand or if your whole business is based on a brand, right, or a brand identity, then I suggest that you take the trademark registration from day one, essentially, because your main focus will be to get that name out there, right? And if anyone could copy the name, then all your progress and all your efforts will just go down the drain, right? So that's the first thing that I focus on. If your whole business is focused on a brand, it's focused on a brand name or a logo, anything like that, register it. If it's not, if your whole brand, for example, in your case, it could be the main purpose of the brand could be for like creating like an application that does XYZ, right? I don't suggest, if there is a lack of funding, then I don't suggest go for trademark initially. You can get it later on, right? Yeah.
So doesn't the trademark protect you also, in the sense not just that you will stop people from copying you, but once you have the trademark, then if someone comes and says, "Hey, you are violating our business," you can say, "Hey, I got the trademark and you didn't object, so I
Yeah.
can do this business, and
Yeah.
you can't serve me a cease and desist letter." Is
Yeah.
how much of that is true? Do I have it right, or is that wrong?
That is right. But the thing is, if you're, for example, you're creating an application, right? You have gone with the like XYZ name, right? Initially, the name of the company or the trademark is not as given as much importance as the thing that it is doing itself, right? So you can afford to change the name. But if your whole business runs on the fact that that name is important, then you have to get it registered, because if someone was to say later on now, hey, why are you using my name, or like, why, that's my brand name that you are using, I'm sending you a cease and desist letter, you have to change it, like remove it, XYZ, right? Then in that case, the whole business falls, right? So that's the level of risk that you are taking in both cases
But
here.
you know what? In today's world, it's so hard to get a name, because if you need the
Definitely.
.com,
Yeah.
then you need the trademarkable .com, which
Yeah.
is a whole other dimension.
Yeah.
and And it's just so, given the combination of those two, and something that's short and sweet, not some great big something.com, which doesn't really work, as a name. So it's challenging to change a name because in the beginning, when I was trying to do this and I was running into problems and all of that, and I considered changing the name, and I just couldn't do it because of all these challenges. So changing a name isn't that easy. I would say probably for most people, most entrepreneurs, or most companies.
Yeah.
All right. How about copyright? One thing I've done, for example, is I've taken my spec talk and copyrighted that
That
on the
makes sense.
advice of my legal team. So was that a good thing to do, and how does that help?
Again, it's a really contextual thing, essentially, right? If that makes sense. If, for example, how copyright works is, if you publish something on the internet, you have the copyright on it, unless the platform that you are publishing it on mentions anything that you publish is their copyright, right? Which they can say, right? For example, they can say that, right? So what you are selling is something that you would be like, or if you're creating a piece of content, for example, a book, you're creating a book, right? That you will be marketing throughout the world, right? You have to get it copyright. Even though once you publish it, it will be yours, but it's better to be safe initially, right? So you get it out there. Before you get it out there, you get it registered, and then you basically start publishing it, essentially.
Now,
And that's an advice you gave. Yeah.
if I copyright something, or if let's say I don't copyright it,
Yeah.
let's say I wrote a book and I didn't copyright it, what does that leave me open to? What could the criminal type of person do in that scenario? Like,
Uh, See, the thing is, once you publish anything, how it works is you have the copyright on it, right? So, but that's why most people, when they like start something, at the end of the website, you will see copyright XYZ, right? Even they haven't registered anything there; they just mention that, right? And it will hold true, essentially. It will hold true. But once you are being, so how the court works is, it doesn't just look at, is this correct or not, right? It will look at a lot of different things, right? So for example, if you publish something, they will first of all look at, when did you publish it, right? Is the person who's suing you, right, or causing you issues, did they publish something before you, or did they do it right after, right? If that makes sense, right? That's why you will see cases where, if if you anticipate a brand, uh, like getting something out in the market with a certain name, right? Some other person who would not even have a use of that name or business title will register it, right? The main reason why they do it is so that once the company who actually wants to use that name or content or anything like that, once they go to actually register it, they will see that it's registered by someone else. So what they do now is they negotiate a price and just get something out of them. And then that's a malpractice, by the way. So court looks into that too. Like, did you even have a use for it? Why did you register it? Right? What's the purpose of it? That's what court looks into, all that too.
okay.
Yeah.
Good to know. So, one last thing on this sort of issue,
Yeah.
patents.
Yeah.
Um, so from what I understand anyway, and again I could be wrong, but patents are very generally difficult and expensive to get, and then even if you get it, then you have to enforce it. So all of that tends to make it relatively something that a typical startup or tech startup anyway doesn't need. Like obviously, if you're doing something that's very product specific, like a medicine or drug or something like that, then yeah, possibly, or some sort of a thing that the world has never seen. But if you're just kind of making an e-commerce app or something, or a fitness app, then patent doesn't come into it at all, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Patent is not something that we deal with, but like you mentioned, rightfully so, it's really expensive. It's a long process. takes a lot of time. It's specifically for something innovative or something that adds a use or improvement to something that exists, right? So, for example, if a machine did something, something new came along that improves it by XYZ%, like I'm just giving a hypothetical, XYZ%, then it could be patented, right? But it's really case specific. For example, like you mentioned, if you are running like a fitness application or anything like that, you don't need patent, right? When do you need patent though? You will need the patent when, for example, you are in the fitness market and now you have created a treadmill that helps like people with like certain disabilities or people who have trouble, who are rehabilitating in and trying to learn to walk again, right? Then you can use that patent, right? You have created something new, then you can use it essentially. What we do is we focus on contracts when it comes to creating something. For example, you might have an idea, right? But you won't be developing it, right? For example, you are creating an application. You did not write all the codes, right? You did not, nor you did you design it. You employed someone to do it, right? But who says that they don't have the right over it now? Because they created it, right? Who says that? Because they can just say, we created this, we'll just pay him the money, and then this is ours now, right? And they just run with it. So that's why the contract that we sign with these people has to mention that it's a basically work for hire. Essentially, is the term that we use, that you have hired them for creating you something, and anything that they create from day one is your property, essentially, right? So, and you own the IP or rights over it, whether it's a patent, trademark, XYZ, right? Anything that's been created is your property, essentially. That's how we protect people, essentially, in
Right,
that
right,
case.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And then there's also the confidentiality agreement.
Yeah.
So I did that, obviously. Even if I show anything to anyone, even if I end up not hiring them, I always do that confidentiality agreement, have them sign that, so that at least they can't just give the idea to anyone, everyone.
Yeah. Actually,
So,
I have a point to raise there, right?
okay, sure, go ahead.
Because see, the main problem what happens with, for example, confidentiality agreements. Let's talk about that for a second. Like, for example, you have an agreement, right? The non-disclosure agreement, which is a confidentiality agreement. The main purpose of that agreement is to what? In case there's any issues down the line, you go to the court of law, you get it enforced, right? That's the only thing that document serves. The court of law or the judge will look at the document and say, you have violated Vivek's right because this document says so, right? But now you have to be really careful about what type of document is it. If the scope is so wide of the confidentiality, right, that it's so vague that you have written something so unreasonable, the court will say the whole agreement was void. By void, I mean it doesn't stand, right? Nothing is to be enforced anymore, right? So it has to be any document that you are using for any purpose whatsoever. It has to be really specific to that specific case or project. Even when it comes to confidentiality, you have to like specify these are the points of confidentiality, right? For example, if you share a certain design, like in your application, I can say the features that it will have, those are confidential, right? The specific site map that you will have, that is confidential. How it will run, what markets you will be targeting with it, that's confidential. Now you can't just say like something completely unrelated is confidential too in that. For example, it's an application, but then you can't say like any website that's being created, that's also confidential, because there's no website to be created there, right? So that's, you have to be specific in that aspect.
I see. Well, yeah, that's good to know. So that really comes down to the legal team that is serving you. A lot of times, what they'll do is just give you standard boilerplate contracts that they
Exactly.
just pull off the net, and so those kind of boilerplate contracts are, you're saying, are probably not going to be very useful.
No. because they are generally non-enforceable. So what's the point of having? It's like you go to like buy a car, right? And you have fitted airbag into the car, right? And then the main purpose of the airbag is what? Once an accident happens, it will protect you and your head, essentially, right? Say, for example, a person just fits, like he tells you it's an airbag, right? He tells you that, but there's actually no airbag inside of it, right? But he just tells you that. So the whole point of having an airbag is to protect you. If it doesn't work, then it's like you don't have it to begin with, right?
Right, right.
So that's the whole
Wow.
thing. Yeah.
Wow, wow, wow. Okay, well, that's really good information to know. So we talked about the NDA. How about actual work contract, whether it's for a person or even a third party? And I specifically want to talk to you about the third party stuff because that's where I ran into a lot of troubles with.
Right.
But anyway, first, tell me about. Let's make it a little more specific. Talking about being specific, I have a startup where I'm developing a smartphone app. I have given out the work, some of the coding work, to a third party, software outsourcing company in another city, let's say.
Yeah.
So now what do I do in terms legally, of speaking, of course?
Third party, where are they based?
It's somewhere in another city. So
Another
I'll just,
city.
yeah, but they aren't in another country. We'll talk about another country, I guess, afterwards. But they aren't like right next door either. But they're still governed by the same laws of the same country. So India, for example. So I'm in Mumbai. Let's say I give it out to Bangalore. So what do I need to do from a legal perspective in this scenario?
Again, I will. There's actually a lot of points I would consider there. There's a lot of points that I would consider there. B- The first thing I will do is, if I was in your case, I have certain expectations that I have out of that person, right? In my, like, it for you, it's an application, right? uh, if we were to simplify it, it's an application that will be doing XYZ features, and it will be created in, let's just say, a month's time, right? Let's just say a month's time, right? And you go on call with them, and they mention that, cool, it will have all the features, and it will be created in a month's time, right? And that's all the talk that's done, by the way, right? That's it. That's a red flag, by the way, because why that's a red flag is you have failed to cover a lot of things, right? Because who will provide the content to be first of all added to the application? Is it you or the software developers, the application developers, right? uh, how what kind of specifically what kind of features will it have, right? For example, you can just say it will be a fitness app that will track your heart rate, and that's it, right? But like specifically in that, what will it also have, right? What type of screens will it have? Will they give you like a map of it, the workflow map, essentially? Is that something that are they giving you? What happens if they don't actually go ahead and fulfill the timeline that they mention? Will you suffer a loss because of it, right? So now get into the what ifs that we personally like to do is, what if I have this expectations out of you and you don't deliver? What happens then? And you ask those questions on to them right on spot, right? For example, they will ask you, I need upfront payment to start the project, right? And you mentioned, cool, how much will be the upfront payment? Suppose the whole project is for 1 lakh. They take 20,000 rupees as upfront payment, right? And suppose they leave midway before even completing your project. What will happen to that money? Are they entitled to it? Are they supposed to keep it, or are they supposed to give you back that? What happens to everything that they have created so far? Is that their property? Will they give it back to you? Right. So then you start getting into the specifics of it. Right. And that's how you create the specific contract. So, for example, you want revisions into that. How will that play out? Right. How much time will they take? Will they ask for, yeah? Will they ask for additional money? right? How much time will it take them to reply to you to begin with, right? Is there any criteria on you? Like things of that nature, and then you have to specifically answer.
Absolutely. Yes, I completely agree with that. And that is where I failed. Well, I didn't. I'd like to take a little bit of time out to describe my story a little bit, even though
Yeah.
it's, you're the guest on our podcast. But
Yeah.
and you can obviously add your advice to this. What happened with me was I hired a software company to do some of the work for me, and now they came from referred, trusted people. So I had a higher level of trust in them, and there was kind of this thing where, okay, we don't really need to worry about so much, cheating or dishonest behavior and that sort of thing. But it ended up not being that way. But so what happened was the way they really got me was they uh, they were really not into documentation at all. You talk about
Mhm.
document this that get this signed. They were totally zero document oriented.
That makes
So
sense.
so it was very difficult to do that anyway, and they wouldn't respond to even if I gave them all of that, they wouldn't be able to deal with that anyway. So what happened was, though, this is where the trickery came in, though. While we were going through it and they were going through the process of developing it, a red flag anyway was that they were doing it very slowly, very poorly, very buggy. But they would, anytime I would say, and this is a startup, there will be changes. So as I'm seeing stuff happening and things come to life, I'm like, oh, this should be different, that needs to be different, that needs to be. They would say yes, yes, yes to all of that. Then what he would do, towards the end, when it was just a complete disaster and basically the entire source code was rubbish and not worth anything, and I basically had to throw it away and start from scratch, they put the entire blame on me that, oh, you made so many changes, we couldn't deal with so many changes. And they documented every single change, put this thing hourly amount to it, which was totally unreasonable, and just said, okay, this change is worth so much money, that changed so much, that changed so much, that changed so much. So because of all this, we couldn't do it. And, here's an incomplete code for you and goodbye. And basically all the money I gave them went down the drain. So, that was kind of the story. But what the challenge I faced was that even though that before that point I knew this was a bad scenario, a lot of red flags were going on, but I just couldn't get them to cooperate, and it was very challenging for me to get out of that and just say, okay, the hell with it, and I'll go to someone else and whatever, because that would mean losing all that time, money, energy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I had this kind of hope in my mind that, if I give them a little more time, a little more money, I'll
Yeah.
get something, and so on and so forth. So I guess a lot of it also was, you need the discipline. Like the startup founder person needs to just really know when to draw the line
Yeah.
and just say, okay, you're out. I'll take this much of a loss, but you're out.
No, that makes
It's
sense.
almost it's almost like a stock. You bought a stock, it's going down, down, down. You just exit with your stop loss level instead of just letting it go all the way to zero. But it's tough. It's mentally difficult. So I'm sorry. So but then so I guess what I was trying to say with all of this is you're advocating that you do all of this legal stuff and have little more elaborate contracts, but then these guys are incapable of that level of detail. So, so I guess the only solution is recognize that they are that way and then just leave them.
Exactly.
That's all
Exactly.
you can
I
do.
think the I think the best thing that any person can do is ask the tough questions, essentially, right? Ask the tough question, then see the competency of the agency or the service provider that you are hiring, right? So if they cannot even answer your specific questions of what if, like it's a basic question. Cool, you gave me a month's deadline. What if you are not able to finish it in the deadline? What then? What will happen? Will I get a discount? Do I have to pay you money? Like what happens to anything and everything? If they try to avoid that question, there's two things that has happened, which I will assume here. they have faced similar issues in the past where they have not finished the deadline, or they expect something bad to happen and they don't want to take responsibility for it or agree to it. Because a competent person will tell you, don't worry, it won't happen, otherwise, we'll do everything for free. That's what my friends do. They literally just say, I'll do that. So for example, they are in social media growth, right? Management, for example, right? They say, I will get your profile to 5,000 followers in 3 months' time, or else I will work for you for free until you get there. That's the level of confidence that they have, right? And you can sign a contract, you can do everything with them, they'll be more than happy to do it. Some of them are so competent that they say, if I don't get you to that level, I will actually pay you because I wasted your time, right? So that's the level of competency that you should have. And if any agency or any service provider is not willing to sign a contract with you, then don't work with them at all, because you can always get that money back that you wasted, but you can never get that time back, right? That's a wasted time. You will never
Right.
get it back.
No, but in my question, I still have that question, which is,
Yeah.
I see in a startup, it's particularly a software startup like an app or a website, there's going to be lots of changes,
Yeah.
and there's no way to predict that at the beginning. So let's say on 1st January, I'm signing up with this third party to get them to do it. I have no idea that this, I'll decide to make this change on the 1st of Feb, or, and then another change on the 1st of March, and so on and so forth, right? So how do we, but I'll be signing the contract on 1st of January. So how do we handle, contract-wise, how are changes that happen along the way handled? Because changes will happen. That I can tell you as a tech startup guy. There will be a lot of changes.
Yeah.
And those are good also, because you need to, as you build it, you realize, oh, it's not really it's that great a market fit. I have to do this, I have to do that. Some news happens, COVID happens, or this happens, or whatever happens. You have to tweak everything to adjust to that. Um, so, so there will be changes, right? So how do you handle that on an ongoing basis, contract-wise?
There's two, three things I can do there, essentially. If you anticipate changes to happen in the whole thing, right? Now, specifically, the changes are not happening with the contract, they are happening with the project, right? The contract will remain the same, the project will change, right? Now, what you can do is you can either set a set number of revisions that you can ask per milestone, right? Per milestone. So for example, before the front end is done, you can ask for 10 changes or like 5 changes, right? And then you can sign that off, so you have that extra. And if there's changes that are going beyond that, you can agree on a price per change that you can set pre-contract, so they can't just give you an arbitrary number, essentially, right? So that's one thing that you can do. The second thing that you can do is not mention any number of changes, but you can say to the client satisfaction. The client satisfaction is your satisfaction, but give a criteria for what that satisfaction will be, right? And have a set period of time where they ask you for your view or your feedback on certain things. For example, the whole project, I'm not tech savvy, not I don't know development, but I know there's a couple of steps to that. So there's front end development, back end development, and then there's miscellaneous, I think, and testing period and XYZ, right? So for example, so before the front end, right? Before we are done with the front end, say for example, they will mention the front end will take 3 weeks time, right? And the contract will mention every week they will give you a progress report, a progress update where you can share your feedback on that specific progress. And you can either agree to that progress or disagree to that progress and then proceed with that,
Got
essentially.
it, got it.
Right?
Well, yes, and what you can do actually in a more advanced scenario is something called function point analysis, or just to put it simply, like this thing where, like, let's say I'm saying, okay, this needs to change, which means it's going to take this much work, which means that many hours. So then you charge per hour.
There you go. There you go. So if you know already that it could change, and if you have a set budget, then
Right.
you
But
can
look,
have that.
I don't know exactly what's going to change, right? Like on 1st of Jan, I don't know what's going to change on 1st of Feb. But what I can set on 1st of Jan is that the changes that happen will, be you basically a change equates to a number of hours, right? So we can just say however many hours the whatever future change add up to, I'll pay those hours at this such and such rate. But then what the confusion there can only be that you don't like they can say, okay, this will take 10 hours, whereas you feel it should only take 5 hours or something. So that's where the argument could come in. But I mean, possibly that's one way to go about it.
You can set a number of hours to that too, actually. In the contract, you can specify that each change should be only take 5 hours. And the logic behind that will be, uh, the change will not be so significant that it's changing the whole project, right? And if it is changing the whole project, then it's the agency's fault because they never communicated with you till that point, till that final thing, right?
Well, the problem with that approach is there's changes have a varying degree. Like you're kind of going from one extreme to the other, which is it's a small change or it's a completely project changing change. But actually, it could be a change that gets done in 1 hour. It could be a change that takes 5 hours. It could be a change that takes 1 week. It could be a change that takes 1 month, depending on what the change is. So that's where the confusion comes in. Because, for example, in this company that basically cheated me, they later on when they submitted all the list of changes that I had requested and they had said yes to, they said, okay, this will take 200 hours. And I mean, nonsense, man. It'll take maximum 10 hours. I mean, it's obviously they were doing that to cheat me. But the point is, uh, how do you deal with a situation like that where they have their interpretation of it and you have your interpretation of it?
That makes sense.
Right? And it's very difficult because here's the thing: they'll come up with any number of BS reasons, this, that, whatever, blah, 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 and but because this other guy has done it in 5 hours in front of your eyes. He did it. I know the 200 hours quotation is absolute nonsense because this guy just did it in front of my eyes in 5 hours.
That makes
So
sense.
but they can do that, and the problem with most entrepreneurs, they may not know that. Like I'm not a coder, let's say, so I don't. I'll believe them, right, and believe that 200 hours stuff. So what do I do in a situation like that? I mean, because you can write all the contracts in the world, right? But then when it comes down to the nitty gritty like that, then what do you do?
For those like cases, we have a sign off things essentially that happens. A sign offs, I mean, like you agree to the number of changes that are happening and how much time it will take. Then you can also mention is industry standards when it comes to it. By industry standards, you mean, or industry quality, you mean, you cannot just give me a garbage thing. It has to be done by what the industry expects out of it. Like you mentioned, 200 is a garbage number, right? For example, in your head, it's 5 hours. They mention 8 hours. Even that's fine, right? Even that's fine, right? But 5 hours and 50 hours, it's a big difference, right? So that industry standard clause will now cover that for you, essentially, right? Where you mention that what's been happening according to the industry, right? The standards of it will take that much time, right? For example, in our case, it could be a contract takes, for example, on average, an NDA will take maximum to maximum 3 to 5 days, right? If a lawyer comes to you and says it will take me 3 months, that's ridiculous, essentially, right? So that's something that you can essentially communicate, right? Like you can communicate or set in the contract itself where you can mention it will be industry standards that will happen. In your specific case, I think the whole agency had red flags from the get go, right? Right, the whole industry like, had from the get go. Now, but how do you know that the agency
Well,
has red flags?
I actually went there. They were in another city. I traveled there. I visited their office. I went in, there was office with people so it wasn't a complete fraud,
Yeah.
but, and they showed examples of all this other work they're doing for existing clients and so on. So there was a certain level of trust. and they, like I said, had been referred to me by people I knew. So, it was like, okay, I really don't need to completely contract every little thing. And I did do the basics, like a NDA, obviously, and then a work contract or whatever. And what I did was I wrote a very high quality, world class specification doc and gave them that. So, but then of course, it was a combination, I think, in their case of both incompetence as well as dishonesty.
I think that's
It started off with incompetence, and
yeah.
then when they realized they couldn't do it, they were like, okay, fine, we'll just take his money and then
Personally, I
do this
think
BS.
what I can recommend, as someone like in your position who knows what to expect out of these people, right? But there's people who are just starting off, they don't know what to expect. I actually recommend to them, don't go with hourly payment. I recommend to them, go with project payments, right? So, and they can take 5 hours to do the whole thing. I do
No,
not care,
it was a
right?
project payment. It was a project payment.
But they added the
And
hourly thing to it, right?
what their logic was like the whole project was supposed to be done in X amount of money. And what happened was they towards the end and all through I knew there were, as you said, a lot of red flags. I have to take the blame in the end.
Yeah.
There were a lot of red flags, but as I said, it was just like, okay, look, Akhil, one of the worst things situation you can possibly be in is to uh, get some software done by someone, and then in the middle of it they'll leave, or you part ways for whatever reason, then that incomplete software you take and go to someone else,
Yeah,
whether it's
yeah. I, I,
that's the yeah, so go ahead.
yeah, I know.
That's what the worst situation, because the other party has to then figure out what they did, what they, understand everything. That takes a lot of time, money, energy. Then they build out from that, and then they'll have their take on it too. So what they'll be like, oh no, this shouldn't have been done this way, should have been done that way, and that may not necessarily be true. It's just that they are coming from that perspective. So then they'll, so it's a nightmare. And I wanted to avoid that nightmare. My whole logic was, well, if I can just get it to some sort of working state, then, I'll get some funding, then maybe,
You,
I
you
can do
get the
such and
MVP
such.
out and then you get that sorted, right?
Exactly. That was my logic. But what I didn't realize was how fundamentally bad it was right from all of
For
it,
example, if let's just say, cool, they did not do it, but now you have wasted your money, you have wasted your time, and those two things that you have wasted. Actually, there was a recent case that like I covered on LinkedIn. It was by Rolls Royce, right? So they went to a company for development of an application, actually, right? And there was a delivery date for that, and the agency did not do it on that date. So they provided 11 days or 10 days. I'm forgetting the specifics, but they provided that, right? Extension. They again did not do it. What they did, Rolls Royce did, was they added, so they sued them, first of all. Why did they sue them? Because forget about the money that they already invested in them. They lost so much time because of the lack of progression of the completion of the project, right? And if they take it to someone else, it would all again cause them a headache. What they got out of that now case was 5 million pounds or euros in damages, so compensation, right? So they got 5 million out of that project, essentially, right? Now, in that case, what happens is, or why did I mention this specific case, was you can have the same thing added in your contract where you mention like time is of essence. I want the thing to be done in under 1 month's time. If you don't, it would cause me damages that you do not, that monetary I cannot even speak about right now, but it would be around this much, right? And now what you can do, if the company is incompetent, at least you get the money from them, or the money you invested plus extra money that you can utilize now to give to the some other developer. Because the main thing would be, cool, you obviously your time has already been wasted, right? there's two things you can do. You can either stick with that company, your time will be wasted a lot more, essentially. You can drop the project and sue them and then get that money back, essentially, which is the longer route, but it will work, essentially. And get the money back, and then you can basically hire a more competent agency and get them the whole thing, right? But that's the longer route. But the thing is, why get to that place, essentially? In your case, I think it was obvious that, which is they had the red
Right.
flag, right? They had the thing going for them.
Yeah,
If
yeah. I
yeah,
let it carry on way, way, way too long, way too long.
I
It
think
was
specifically if there is a timeline given, is something I would suggest to a lot of new entrepreneurs. If there's a specific timeline given in any project, you give them one chance to fix that. That's it. Do not
right.
give any other chance. That's it.
Correct, correct, correct.
Yeah.
And set it up. Now, here's another thing. In software, we have this thing called agile methodology, where what you do is you build, uh, you do multiple cycles of building and testing and looking at a final projects. So obviously, at the first time, you just do one. To simplify it as an example, let's say I just do login and registration, say, and that gets done, and then you move on to the main screen, whatever, get that done, then you go on to the other, bit by bit. And so my question to you is, would it make sense to have a contract, multiple contracts, where I have a contract that, hey, the software agency, you build me the login screen and the login and registration function, new user registration functionality, and that's it. And then once that gets done properly, then you will sign a second contract for the main screen or home screen or whatever. So
Uh,
what do you
you
think of
can
something like that?
you can have it. You can easily have it. What you can mention in the contract is like there's milestones to that project, right? So for example, you get the this thing XYZ done, and then we will sign a new contract. So what you can specify there is on completion of X thing, we will go back to the contract and sign a new contract for the next phase. Essentially, basically, is what you just mentioned, and that can completely be done easily.
Okay. So
Yeah.
are you mean an addendum to the original contract or a whole new contract?
It could be revised essentially. It's like a revision or it's like a new contract addendum, like anything
Whatever you
works.
want to do. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Either or. Okay. Cool.
Either on. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that that was a very challenging time and period. Part
These,
of
yeah,
sorry, good. Part of what happened also was the whole COVID thing happened right in the bang middle of it too. So I lost 3 months there because of the lockdowns. I couldn't complain about that, right? And then after that, they lost like a lot of their employees left. There was a lot of churn, and then after that, then so, I mean, it was a bit of the external circumstances as well, but still, I mean, I agree. There were a lot of red flags, and um, I should have been much more disciplined. And that's what I personally would like to speak to the viewers viewing this video. Please, please, please be disciplined. Do not be, sort of let the whole oh, if I give them another chance, oh, if I give them a little more time, a little more money, it'll work out, and it's just there's that, you got to draw the line at some point and just be disciplined. And then make sure that you have access to the code at all times, the source code at all times. That was another problem for me. They had it on their servers, and so I was kind of helpless. I didn't even have the code.
that makes sense. Yeah.
So that was another terrible, terrible thing. Again, see, the whole thing with them was these were very, very known people who referred me. In the end, I had to go back to these people who referred me, and I told them, what kind of people have you referred me to? And then they intervened, and then I got the code once they intervened and stuff like that. So it was very, very bizarre from that point of view that these people would refer someone like that to me. And what was interesting was what the people who referred me said, that they were shocked because they have done work with this person and this, his company multiple times, and it was all fine. So they were shocked that all this was happening with me. Now, the difference though between that and this was my project was very large, and they had
Yeah.
sort of minor stuff. So
Yeah.
possibly this guy was capable of doing this,
Yeah.
but he was incapable of doing the bigger job.
Yeah, I
So
think I was going to specify that, like maybe the projects that they have done so far was smaller projects. What your project was something really specific, really big, a truly custom project, essentially, right? And in that they bit more than they can chew, essentially, right? They thought they could do it, and blah blah
Right.
blah.
So anyway, just to let the viewers know, please make sure you have the contract that has all the details that Akhil very kindly informed us about. Make sure that you're disciplined, and at the end of the day, just walk away.
Exactly.
Just draw the line and walk away. It's the way you'd sell a losing stock that you bought. Just sell it, take the loss, and go. Because if you don't, it'll go all the way down to zero.
Yeah. I think one last thing I would like to point out here is we mentioned this from client side, essentially. Like we are a client, we
Yes,
are going to a service
yes,
provider.
yes.
A lot of times what happens is the script flips, right? Right. So as a service provider or as someone who is just starting off, right, essentially, any client that you get is a big deal, right? Especially if you are starting off. A lot of people have a tough time saying no, first of all, to any request that they get. They think they can manage it, they think they can do it, and then that causes them problem, right? What I suggest to any new service providers or anyone who has been in the field for a quite a while, money is good, obviously, when it comes to things, right? Money is good. But what the other thing that you should focus on when onboarding a client is the attitude that they have towards certain things, right? Now, if I flip the script and say, cool, I'm a service provider, you want something from me, and whatever you have asked for, if you go out of that scope and ask me something else, right? For example, you come to me, you ask me for a non-disclosure agreement, right? And in the middle of the project, you are like, can you also draft me like a freelancer agreement, right? Out of scope work should never be done, nor you should take it. You should always be compensated for it, right? So have that conversation with your client. Understand that there is an exchange of value that's happening. They are not doing you a favor by paying you. You're not doing them a favor. They want something in return, is why they're paying you, right? And most people forget that. So I would say never rush anything and understand what's being done, what's expected out of you, and make sure it's written down somewhere and
You know what I
cover
what I
for the
like
what
what
scenarios.
I'd like to add to that is in the scenario where you are the customer and the other person is the provider,
Yeah,
that's a red flag. If that guy is saying yes to everything,
exactly.
like I say, hey, can you do this change? Yes, yes, yes. Can you do that change? Yes, yes, yes. Then that's a red flag because that's
Yeah.
what happened to me. He was saying yes, 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 and I was, I didn't think that much of it at that time, but then later on he used all of that against me and said, "Oh, it's all your fault. You made so many changes." But point is, yeah, that's you should whether when you're the provider, you should also be, obviously very minor stuff you can allow, right? I mean,
Exactly. But that should be something that you have communicated with the thing, right?
with the
Like
initial
minor
contract,
changes, yeah, like minor changes I will allow you, right?
yes, yeah.
Because a lot of time what happens is minor changes and major changes become the same thing for a client, essentially, right? Because we have seen it happen, and you might have seen it from your experience too, where a client oversteps his boundary because you allow him to, essentially, right? Like for example, calling you at ridiculous times, right, where you have certain number of hours but still calling you at time, or asking you to do the work on weekend without you getting paid, essentially. I'm just saying, if you are providing something of value, then make sure that value is first of all communicated with the client that you're providing it to, and that value's worth in terms of money is also communicated there, essentially. Yeah.
So, on a similar line, supposing we are talking about third-party, software providers, whatever. What if it's a employee? So you hired someone. I've hired someone to do whatever it is. Let's say stick with programming only. So he's a programmer, and he's doing a bad job. So what's the scenario? Obviously, now I have some sort of a contract with him that whether it's either an employment contract or a contractor contract, what What can you say to that?
There's huge differences when it comes to that, essentially, right? You cannot just fire an employee. You can fire a contractor, but you can't just fire an employee on that, essentially, right? There's a notice period that's to be covered, first of all. A, a, the law basically provides them with certain protection, essentially, when it comes to things, how things are to be handled, right? So, if it was an independent contractor or a freelancer, obviously the notice period is also given, but basically you can manage it. You can say a week's notice, 2 weeks notice. For employee, you cannot just say that. You have to give a month's notice, for example, right? And there's extra security that's to be given, right? For example, a month's salary is to be given in some countries, right? Sufficient, like, basically, other packages, any other bonuses are to be given if they were entitled to it, right? So things of that nature are to be also be considered.
Sure, sure. You're talking about the financial side of it, and that's great. But I'm talking more about the sort of dispute area where the employee feels he's doing a good job or adequate enough job, but you feel he's not. So, uh, what about that part?
Same thing then happens again. It's an employee, as in it's a full-time worker, right, for your company. Or is it like, how do you classify employee essentially here?
Well, yeah, I mean, full time as well as the contract itself is an employee contract, right? So, I guess the employee contract itself would specify all those things, whether how much money he'll get if he's fired, the termination, details and conditions of termination and all of that. But still, I mean, what should an entrepreneur look for? Well, I mean, what are some of the simple things an entrepreneur could do when he's either hiring a full time employee or even a contractor?
Okay, like specification is really important when it comes to it, right? So, for example, a lot of people, what they do is they interchange employee and contractor a lot. And that's a big mistake that happens, because an employee is someone that you have more of a responsibility towards, essentially, as an employer, right? Because you have to give them holidays, you have to give them, like, for example, remuneration, like extra compensation, benefits, right? Healthcare, XYZ. There's a set number of hours they will be working for you, 9 to 5, for example. They will be working for you Monday to Friday, for example, right? Everything has to be specified there, right? And an employee is someone that's on with your company on a full time basis, right? Now, a contractor has more flexibility than an employee, and you have less, what do you call it, less of a responsibility towards them, right? There's no taxation obligations on you when it comes to that, right? It's their headache, they have to handle it, right? And everything else has to be done. The main thing that I would focus on when it comes to hiring any of them is the amount of work that they will be doing, or the set number of hours that they will be working for, essentially, right? For an employee, you will have obviously got more control. You can mention they will be working 9 to 5. If you call for a meeting, you can call them like within a short periods of notice. For a contractor, you will have less of a chance to do that because they work on their own terms, right? You can mention they have to work 25 hours a week, but you can mention 9 to 5, right? They might agree to it, but they won't, right? So that's something that I would consider. But ultimately, what expectations you have out of the work that they're supposed to do ultimately should be covered. The deliverables that they will be generating for you, specifically for the contractor side, has to be mentioned. It has to be
Correct.
mentioned always.
But again, my question come back to the quality side of it. So what I mean is, let's say the person is a contractor. I've hired a contractor, and he is the same example, a login and new user registration
Yeah.
he's supposed to do.
Yeah.
He does a terrible job of it.
Yeah.
So what legal rights do I have in that scenario?
Okay. Like, I mean, you have a lot of rights then, essentially. You have a lot of
Yes,
rights.
but he can argue now. He'll say no, or this reason, that excuse, this excuse, that excuse. So what can an entrepreneur do in that situation?
Essentially, the rights that you have are governed by two things, I would say, right? They are governed by the contract that you have signed, first of all, right? And then the second thing is what the court of law decides for you, essentially, within the set guidelines, essentially, right? But when the court of law comes to you, or like judges, right? So the main thing that you can do is give them a notice. You can give them a termination notice, right? The first right is you just terminate the thing, keep the source code, call it a day, recover your money if it's written there that they have to give back the money to you. You can use an a platform like Escrow is a great platform when it comes to it, where the money is with the middle party essentially, right? And you have to make the full like payment, but essentially until and unless the work is done, your money is safe, right? If the contractor was to leave midway, if the contractor doesn't do a good job, escrow will keep your money safe, and in most cases will also return it completely to you. Essentially, that's the first thing you can do to protect yourself, right? The second thing you can do is like Rolls Royce did. They sued them. They sued the agency that they got, right? So, and they got the 5 million euros in damages,
So my
essentially.
question though is though, what if my employer sues me for wrongful termination and I'm not wrongful, you did a horrible job, but so now we are in this gray area where, oh, this line of code, that line of code, what would happen there?
Then that's up to the litigators how they prove the whole thing, because you might
And
say one thing and they might say one
so,
thing.
so
Yeah.
litigators in court will decide basically.
Litigators and court will decide, but they would look at a lot of things actually there. They would
Got it.
look at the industry standards. They would look at what's been written, what's being done. For example, suppose I hire you, like hypothetical, I hire you to write me a book that's for mathematics for 10th grade, right? 10th grade mathematics, right? And you are my employee, and you give me a book that's on English for kindergarten, right? I tell you that's not even the right thing. I ask you, tell me no, 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 this is something that is it. This is what you. Yeah, it's mathematics, right? The court will look at it and say, no, it's not mathematics, it's English.
Right,
You are wrong,
right,
right? So
right, right.
that's how it will get settled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, I'm sorry, Akhil, this podcast is going a little bit longer than expected. It's very, very valuable. I'm loving it, and I think this is incredibly good and useful information. So maybe let's try and go on for another 10 minutes and
Yeah,
wind it up.
definitely
Oh,
works.
you're okay, right? So, okay, now let's move on to the good news scenario where, let's say, entrepreneurs succeeded and some buyout or even funding. Let's first talk about funding, then buyout. So someone wants to fund the startup. What do we look for in that scenario? What should the funding contract? I don't even know if it's a contract, but whatever legal paperwork we sign, what should that have on
Uh,
funding?
it's a complex topic, but I would try to simplify it. Essentially, it depends a lot on what is being done. Obviously, the funding is being done, but how is the funding is being done? In which category of business are you in? Where is the investor from, right? And everything else, right? There's three stages I can say to a fundraising. There's a pre fundraising, there's fundraising, and post fundraising. Pre fundraising is when the due diligence is done, essentially. By due diligence, I mean the investor side, they will look at your books, they will look at your accounts, they will look at your legal side of things, right? They will check if all your contracts are in place, how long the contract will last, do you have a business, do you have any IP registration, right? Because that all will add to the valuation of the business itself, right? And you should always be truthful when it comes to it, because on pitch deck you might say something, but if it's not there when the investor is doing their due diligence, then you can fail essentially, right? And on the startup side, they should also do their due diligence. Check if the investor is actually, uh, first of all, the investor is who he is, first of all, right? Do they have a backing? Have they invested in any startups to begin with? Who are they? Check all that. Do a background check. Do your own due diligence, right? Don't share anything that shouldn't be shared with the investor, right? Initially, at least, right? But then you can share it later on. If it's to be shared, then you can sign an NDA, right? So that's another thing that can happen.
Can you give an example of something that shouldn't be shared with an investor? Because they'll probably want to ask for anything, everything. Give us all your info. What are some examples of information that I should not share with them?
Like in my case, I've seen people giving like a general idea of the whole business, at least on the first call, right? And then going into the specific of how it's to be executed after they done their due diligence, right? Like, cool, these are the steps I will take to get into XYZ market through this channel, through this distributor, right? Initially, you can say, I will just go into this market through this distributor. I mean, I'll go into this market. I have this product and I will be sharing it throughout, right? Like in a
Got
highly
it.
risky field. Yeah. And
So
then you get in.
what are some of the documents I'd sign with a potential investor? Obviously, NDA would be one of them. What are other things during the pre-register funding phase?
Yeah. So a couple of documents that get signed. It's the first one is the term sheet. The term sheet is a non-binding document essentially. Non-binding, I mean, it's like it sets the stage for the investment, if that makes sense, right? So sets the stage is in the future after the due diligence and everything else is done. Like everything is clear after the due diligence, if something is to be fixed, that's fixed. Then we proceed to the share transfer and share subscription agreement, essentially, right? Where you are subscribing to it, or if there's no share to be given, then you're transferring it, essentially, right? You are transfer. For example, a founder has 30% share in his, like, not 30%, 70% share in his company, then some of those shares are being transferred to the basically investors, right? So that's the second agreement that's being signed. But before you sign that, again, the term sheet has to be signed that covers the main terms of on the basis of which that share transfer or share subscription agreement will be signed. The main thing I would recommend here is you don't have to give up equity in your company to raise shares. You can either do it through debt or you can do a mixture of both, essentially, right? Convertible.
But debt, there would be interest payments, right?
Yes.
And that,
Yeah.
so again,
But most people see the thing is if you are playing the long term game, then equity is valuable.
right,
It's a
right,
lot more
obviously, yeah, yeah.
right? Because you can get the money back, but there's also scenarios where you can buy back the shares from the investors,
Okay,
right? You
and we
can
can
get
have that in the contract itself.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah,
Like
that I'll
on
buy
what
back.
cases can you buy back? For example,
Obviously, I may have to buy back at a higher price because the valuation of the company went up, but I can buy it
you
back.
that's something you can agree on essentially, right?
Right,
The
right,
fair value has to be given essentially, right? The market rate has to be looked at, but then again
right.
you can mention that if, for example, you are an investor in my company, right? And you have, like, for example, 10-30% shares in my company, right? Now I don't want a random person coming into my company. For example, you were a strategic buyer, you bought shares into my company when the valuation was low. Now it has raised quite a lot. Now you are selling your shares, you're getting a good chunk of returns for it. But who you sell it to is also important because then they get decision making powers into the company, right? So what generally happens is there's clauses that mention that if any shares is to be sold, has to be sold to the existing shareholders first, right? So they get the share back first of all, because then it will, you can say, it stays in the family kind of thing, right? Stays in the family thing,
Correct.
and then you can
So
get strangers.
that raises a very interesting question that I was wondering about just a few days ago.
Yeah.
How much decision power is there for the shares? So, for example, let's say a person has 1%, he owns 1% shares of the company. Can he block anything, everything, or just, or because his percentage is so low, he doesn't really have much power? How
Uh,
would that work?
Not really. So there's a couple of powers, like for simplicity's sake, I will just mention there's daily managing powers that you have. That does not matter how much percentage share you have in the company. You can just specify, like, this guy has, he's like the director of the company and he has the, like, XYZ management in the company, right? Small amounts, for example, anything that's to be signed off under 2 lakh rupees, he can sign off, right? But the main thing is the main decision of the company has to go through the board of directors where there's a joint vote to be done, right? Essentially. So that's how it's done. If the majority of share or the majority of people then agree to it, then you can go ahead with the decision. Single person cannot just make that decision, essentially.
Okay, so a single person can't
You know.
cause a monkey
But
wrench. Yeah. Okay.
but there's also a deadlock scenario, essentially. For example, there's equal ownership, right? 50%, 50%. Then what you
Then
can, Yeah, you
Yeah.
get like a third person in there, and then
Right.
that guy basically, whoever you choose, is the
Yeah.
third person who decides on that matter for you,
Like
essentially.
a mediator or whatever.
Exactly. And that's
I,
important for businesses because a lot of people, what they do is they have a second co founder. They start the company with them, but they never think of these scenarios which
right.
could
Right.
happen.
So it's basically mathematical. So if I have 99% shares and this other person has 1% shares, I can always overpower him.
Exactly. Like you
And
have the major shareholding in the company, essentially.
so if let's say some company comes and wants to buy me out, and I say yes, he can't say no. I mean, he can say no, but I would my 99% would overpower him, and he'd have to
There's
go a lot.
cases, there's scenarios, there's like basically in one case, I don't think it would be required. Like you can waive certain rights and such, right? Obviously. But
Huh.
if there were like, for example, 15, 20 people with one person rights, right? Then situations can change essentially where you're
Then they
protecting the
then
group's interest.
they'd form a class action
Yes,
thing, right?
like
Yeah.
you are protect. Yeah, essentially, and you can initially have basically mentioned that you are protecting uh, the smaller shareholders' rights and such. Because there's
Right.
because see the thing is, for example, if the major shareholders want to sell the stake in the company to some other company, right? Say for
Yeah.
example, you mentioned that cool, I will sell the whole company at uh, X price, right? And the other shareholders don't agree to it, but they have the power to like ride that same wave. By that I mean at least they will get the same amount, the same price value for the shares that will be sold at the same price for
Well,
their shares, basically.
but what I
There,
could do is, let's say I own 100% of shares, and then I, gave them 1% of share for whatever reason. They were going to do some work for me, so I compensated them with the 1% of shares. When I gave them that shares, can I give it to them in such a way that they don't have these powers? They just have the shares as a financial compensation, but
yes, there's
yeah.
different types of like common shares, and then they you have there's different types of shares of shareholders in the company, essentially. Yes,
Right. Okay. Great. Great. So
you can also have conditions to giving shares, by the way,
right.
right?
So if
Because
if I say, it's performance based, and then if you didn't do a good performance, then I can say you don't get that
exactly.
1%.
You can
Right.
have, like, for example, some companies, what they have is a vesting period and a cliff period, essentially, right?
Right.
So, cliff period and vesting period is like, for a cliff period is like, say, for example, you have 1 year's cliff. 1 year's cliff means you have to at least work for the company. The founders, for example, have to work for the company at least for an year, right? And then they will get X amount of shares, right? And that depends on the vesting period. For example, if it's 3 years vesting period, then you will get the whole percentage that you were supposed to get in 3 years time, essentially.
Right. But if I didn't work for the 3 years, then I
You would
don't
only
get
get the proportional level of
that
that then.
that ratio.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. Great. Great. Great.
But you have to work at
Um,
least for 1 year in that because one is the
right.
cliff.
Right. Right. Okay. Brilliant. Brilliant. So we talked about the three phases of uh, investment. So there's the we talked about the pre-investor stage. Then there's the investor. That's when the actual money comes, and I
Yeah.
hand over the shares to them and all of that. So there's what paperwork is involved then?
There's a lot. There's a
There's
lot
a
of
lot.
trivia.
Okay, okay.
There's a
Let's
lot.
keep that. Let's keep
Yeah.
that for another video. I think we're going to have to do a second video
Yeah.
podcast with you. I think.
Yeah.
Um, and then, but I'm curious about the post uh, investment stage. That's the first I've heard of it. What happens? What is the post stage? What happens there? What's the paperwork there?
Post fundraising is something of a concept that we have basically said just for like understanding or like explanation's sake. In
Huh.
post fundraising, you can just mention like the actual money or like the share transfer is being happening then essentially, and what also happens is post fundraising after you have received the money in your bank, that's when the expansion happens for your company, right? That's when you
Right.
start hiring people, that's when you start expanding into the new markets, and XYZ happens.
Well, there's also the whole thing. It's kind of like is the scenario where now I'm the client and they are kind of the customers, the people who gave me the money, because they'll want progress reports, and
Exactly.
they'll so all that happens. So I guess it's almost like a contract. That
Exactly.
they'll expect that, okay, Vivek, you need to achieve so many users go from 10,000 users to 100,000 users within a year. And if you don't do that, then there's consequences or whatever.
Exactly. There's this
Right.
conditional investment a lot more. Yes.
Right, right. So all those sort of contracts will be there in the
Yes.
post fundraiser stage.
Fundraising, most people don't realize fundraising in general, it takes at least 2 to 3 months to actually raise funds. Like it's not
Right.
easy. It's not like
Oh,
you take like talk to the investor today, tomorrow you have the
you have
money
the
in the
money. No, I
bank.
know that. I know that.
Yeah, like most people
Yes.
do not understand the whole process
Yeah, yeah,
essentially.
yeah. So
That's why
now
you need a
buy.
legal team.
So now buyout. Now the first question I have about a buyout is, would it, will a company like let's XYZ company is buying me out? Will they buy out my entire company, or will they just buy out the shares in my company and then like the company will have a bunch of money in its account? And I'm still the owner of this company. I just no longer. So basically, it was a transfer of IP. They took the IP from this company to, they own the IP. They're not interested in the company itself, and so I still have my company, and the company's bank account has money. That's one scenario. The other scenario is they buy the entire company itself, including
Yeah.
the IP and everything. And
Yeah.
I don't even have, and then what happens is I get the money in my personal account as a capital gain of my shares, in the company. So,
Yeah.
which which scenario do companies generally tend to go for? Which is the better scenario? What are the advantages, disadvantages of these two scenarios?
So you have to consider during buyout, you either take, you can select essentially a lot of things, right? Like you mentioned, like I can only take the IP of the company and XYZ. In some cases, there's departments being taken from the company. For example, an IT department is only being taken and such, right? And in some cases, there's also liabilities being taken with the company, essentially, right? Liabilities mean if the company has a case going on against it, then that's something also being taken along with the company, right? The most common one is selective one. Essentially, most people like select what they need from that company, and that's generally done as a strategic buyout. By strategic buyout, I mean you lessen the competition in that market, essentially.
So,
So,
for
for example,
example, oh, I'm sorry, but I thought,
no, no. For example, a company which is like your company, like Vivek's company, is running three different departments under your name. You are making automobiles. You are also creating T-shirts. You are also in the like washing machine appliances and all that crap, right? And people have a company comes along and it's like an t-shirt, like a fashion brand, right? And they are targeting the market that you are targeting or already have a place in. So what they will do is instead of buying your whole company, which also incorporates the automobiles, the t-shirt and the washing machine and appliances, they would only buy this as the t-shirt line, essentially. That's the
got
only
it, got
thing.
it, got it.
Yeah.
Now, but in most tech startups, and including mine, there's just the app, right? And then there's the book of business of the app, which is all the users.
Yeah.
And really, they're going to be more interested in the users more than anything else. So, in a scenario like that, what would a company do? It'll probably be a tech company like a Google or a Facebook or a smaller version of those kind of companies would buy me out. What would they do in a scenario? Because I don't have multiple d- lines of business and all of that. There's just the app, and then the users who are using it really are the two essential uh, items of value that I have. So what um, would which scenario would a company prefer? They buy the entire company, or they just buy my IP and the user book of business?
I see. That's it depends on the purpose again, Vivek. Like it comes down to why are they buying it, right? So, for example, Elon Musk bought Twitter or
Right,
X formerly,
right,
right? He bought
right.
the whole thing
Oh,
essentially because he wanted the full ownership of the whole thing, right? The purpose was not strategic. The purpose was nothing like that. He just wanted a platform that was supposed to
right.
provide freedom of speech essentially, right? So he bought the whole thing. In your case it would be if they want the whole thing, if they like it depends on the internal discussions the company has. It depends on why the purpose of the thing is, right?
Got it, got it.
Then generally they do it. Most people what they do is they if they are buying it strategically, they if it's a small company they buy the whole thing. essentially. They buy the full thing, and if it's not, then they are
Hmm,
only
yes,
going for the specifics, essentially. In
so
that.
if they buy the whole thing, then what will happen is I'll just get the value of the shares in my personal bank account, not the company account, because the
Yeah.
company and is gone,
Everything is
is
gone.
theirs.
Yeah, yeah,
So I'll get the shares as capital gains
yeah, yeah.
in my personal account.
Yeah. There's a lot of
Wow.
headaches when it comes to especially acquisition, essentially, right? So it's a lot to consider and it's a lot more complicated.
Sure,
That's why
sure,
I'm not going into the specifics
sure,
because
sure, sure.
I don't want to give and say something that would be taken as the wrong, if that makes sense.
Of
Yeah.
course, of course.
Mm.
Yeah, and probably it'll take a lot of time. And
Yeah.
just one last thing: what are some of the essential documents or contracts that you sign during a buyout?
Again, there's a lot of things to be considered. Like the transfer agreements is one of the first things that happens, right? And then the IP assignment agreement, and that's another thing that happens, right? Sometimes you also sign an ND and such. Again, it comes down to the purpose of the whole thing, right?
Right.
Because you are getting the full thing in that. Because if you're not getting the IP, then the documents change, right? If you're
Right,
only
right.
getting the shares, the documents change, right? So
Got it.
those are the some things that generally happens in that case.
Okay, okay.
But
Yeah,
then you
yeah.
have to also consider where is the person from, right? For example, a company from China, there's restrictions when it comes to someone buying in India from China, essentially, right?
With that, yeah, the political issues,
Yeah,
all that.
but there's a lot to be considered, essentially,
Correct,
when
correct.
it happens in that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But the main contract would be like the terms of transfer, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Whatever that
Or
the
the
official name.
assignment, or like the IP transfer agreements and everything like that, essentially, where you mentioned,
Okay.
like, cool, these are the IPs that are being transferred to that person.
Great, great, great. Well, I think we've gone way over time here, so let's wind up here. Thanks so much for joining us and all the wonderful, valuable information and advice you gave us. Are there any final words you had to say before we finish with this?
Uh,
To a budding entrepreneur, what advice would you give someone?
I would say play the long term game when it comes to entrepreneurship. I would say don't just hop onto opportunities that you see. If you have a vision when it comes to running your business, focusing on shortcuts will take you nowhere. What you should establish is a strong foundation. Strong foundation is generally based on the type of people that you're working with, or if you're working solo, even then, who are you hiring for help and everything else like that, right? So focus on the long term gains. Do your best when it comes to it, but have patience when it comes to the returns that you would get, right? And focus a lot more on networking and seeking help where you can. And provide value or showcase your journey, because people like supporting those who are in the middle of transforming, essentially.
Right.
Yeah,
Like the story, the
exactly.
journey. Well, again, thanks so much. And everyone, Akhil's information is below in the description. So feel free to look into that, visit his website, his startup legal agency. All the information's down there. And thanks so much, Akhil. I think we'll probably see you in a second podcast because there's so much more we can talk about, I think.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely. It was fun.
so,
It was fun overall.
yeah, I had a great time.
Yeah,
Um,
thanks so much.
all right, thank you.
Yeah,
And have fun, everyone. Bye bye.
thank you.